Jayden Ali.
Mm.
How do you
Government
describe
name.
what you do?
Oh, interesting. A bit of everything. Generally, I'm interested in how cities operate and how they're occupied and how they're designed. In more general spaces, I describe it as somewhere between art and architecture.
How do you separate art and architecture? Or are they one and the same for you?
I don't, to be honest. They're one and the same thing. But the profession, i.e. the more formal architectural profession, normally equates architecture with building. And so until that title is liberated from that stranglehold, sometimes I need to wear a different hat. But for the main, I'm between things, like how objects are made, how culture is created, how it's supported, how it's designed for. I'm interested in how the city operates in a 360, four-dimensional way, not necessarily only in how it's constructed and designed in the more formal sense. Like I'm interested in how people gather and how they break bread and how they commune, how they eat, how they exchange. I'm interested in the financial mechanisms that underpin it, like who constructs policy, as well as the formal buildings that come out of it that host these kind of gatherings as well. And more broadly, I'm interested in the stories that we tell that allow us to gather momentum around new visions of the future. And really that goes to the core of what I do, which is about speculating as to the world we should be living in. Like it's a future projection. Like that's what I think architects do. They're designing, they're taking a position on what exists today and thinking about what it should be tomorrow.
What are the kind of building blocks of building your architectural thinking outside of the practice of being an architect?
I think the city, more broadly, and I'd use the city in the kind of wider sense as a concept, right? In terms of city, not London, like the metropolis, like how we gather in cities as in large numbers as humans, as community, and different communities should really be two things. It should be a space where people see themselves represented in it, in its formation, in its tectonics, in its sound, in its music, in its film, in its literature. But it should also be a space that is supportive of the way in which people want to live or how they already live. So it's a twofold thing. It's about recognition and about support.
So is it about being able to see what's already there and then amplifying it, and then like the good parts of it and the things that are not so good, being able to, okay, like how do we maybe downplay that? How do we turn down the volume and this kind of thing? Like seeing this like more from a DJ brain.
Yeah,
You're the
sure.
architect brain and I'm the DJ brain.
Yeah,
so I'm
yeah,
like, okay, I'm trying to take the bass out of this and rise it up on this.
Yeah. In terms of our practice, yes, it's about amplifying things that we see that we think have value or have historically been undervalued, right? Like it's taken that core bass line that's kind of like rumbling in the background and just tuning out the noise that's kind of dominating the entire time, just to make that a little bit more visceral. I'd prefer not to think of it as exclusionary. Do you know what I mean? I don't think I've never really thought about it in terms of taking things out in a reductive sense, because it seems pessimistic. I've always thought about it in an optimistic sense, but it's an interesting thing that you throw in the mix. The recognition is really about how people already amplify their spaces. And the reason I have this wide definition of what architecture is because I believe that people already make space. And that as architects, we're concerned with the production of space. I don't think we're concerned with the production of buildings. I think buildings are part of space, but I think space can be constructed in different ways. Like we was talking previously before being on there about your event at Earth. You constructed a space for people to gather. It had a very particular tone to that evening. I saw a good friend of mine in Harlem the other day. Naja produced this amazing event at the Apollo, which was around her research in how she mapped Malcolm X's impact on Harlem. But it had an amazing feeling to the night because it was part congregation and community gathering, and then it was part performance, and it was part DJ session. Like people were dealing with the building elements, like the different elements that go into constructing the space, and sometimes they're not physical. Sometimes they're just about how you're greeted, or the smell that exists when you walk through a market, or the smell that exists in your auntie's home, or whatever it is. So it's really about honoring how people already do that and giving and amplifying that and making that kind of the foundation from which we can take it further.
100%. You are one of the people that inspired that, I guess, be pushing the lecture format forward with your own work. You had a banger line that it's like turning images, sound and performances into steel, bricks and timber permanently at scale. That was like a banger line. And like I was going through this period of thinking about, all these things that from the past that kind of got lost, like not a lot actually survives. So like whether it's clubs, records, music, literature, people, they come and go. But buildings are one of the things that are good for the most part, going to last longer than a lot of scenes and these kind of ethereal things. It was that kind of why you were attracted to architecture in the first place, because it felt like permanent and then at scale.
Well, there's two questions there, I think. Like one is about the attraction to architecture in the first place, but maybe I can come back to that and just speak to this idea of permanence and that scale. I actually think, scenes do dissipate to a certain degree. They kind of probably have a kind of an echo and a resonance, and they live on within the communities and the people they've been touched by. And ironically, they probably outlast many buildings. I've been spending a lot of time in New York. If you think about the kind of like the lifetime of a building in New York, in that it goes up. They've built most of those skyscrapers in the last 100 years. Like they're demolishing them often because technology grows and space is at a premium. And so then they build something else. So the city is kind of cannibalistic in itself. The one distinction for me is that institutions seem to exist for a really long time now. Of course, we live in London, so housing stock has been here for a while, but you can even see it in avid forms of social housing. This stuff is getting demolished and rebuilt all the time because we have to build in a denser way. But institutions, going back to this event that you came to at the Royal Academy of Arts, they're solid. They're really, what's the word they're stubborn.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like they kind of don't move. They're like, when someone tries to take your wisdom tooth out and the dentist is just in there pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling and the wisdom tooth don't come out, and you think, this thing is a stubborn thing because it's big and it's chunky and it's rooted. And I think this is why I'm interested in how you commandeer institutions, how you make new institutions in the formal sense and also the informal sense. But in institutions, I suppose I'm talking about like museums and more formal cultural spaces. There are these stubborn elements around which the city continues to kind of grow in that respect. And that's a new thing. And that's why I'm interested in the idea of kind of permanence. What else did I say? Permanence and...
turning images, sound and performances into steel, brick and timber. Yeah. Permanently at scale.
Permanently at scale, because that's where power is entrenched. The real thing for me is why I'm interested in producing space or spaces and parts of the city that are resonant to people who have historically been on the edge or don't necessarily have their culture rendered in bricks and mortar is because I've entered a profession where I don't see myself reflected in that. Like I walk around the city with my wide eyes and I'm like, we're really living in this space. For me, there's a recognition that to build physically requires privilege, and it requires capital, it requires knowledge, and it requires access. That's why there are not that many black sculptors. Mm-hmm. Where do you make this stuff? How do you fund this stuff? Where do you store this stuff? And if you think of buildings as kind of like large forms of sculpture, or at least require the same elements, then it's no wonder that black people, brown people, people from lower economic backgrounds, those who are not necessarily born into privilege, don't have the capacity to make spaces like that. And so for me, that's the bit that's missing, right? Like there's an effervescence in those communities and where they channel their artistic output. Like, that's why Black music of the 20th century is the dominant music of the 20th century, right? Like, that's why, like, culinary food from around the world.
So that's the things we have.
You know,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Because that's the outlet that we have. Like, no wonder, because all of this energy that was in the fit, that could have been distributed across making things physically, is now introduced into kind of like fashion and cuisine and music, right? So the fragility around those things is that they don't have this permanence. They do operate at scale, but they don't have this kind of permanence in some ways, unless you class the echoes. Not in the permanence way that I'm talking about. And they are at risk. And I think you need to be across both the immaterial and the material to have some form of sustained presence. The immaterial is all of the music type stuff, all of the fashion type stuff, all of the cuisine type stuff, the other kind of cultural expression. The material is that kind of when you render that into kind of bricks and steel and glass, like that is the space in which those with privilege have always known to invest their money and their privilege in those outputs as well. So that's why I'm interested in the translation. And I think it's a very particular position I have, because I do understand how the city is formed, and I have a degree of privilege in order to kind of design and make it and shape it.
So it's important that you're doing both at the same time, like actually making the images and producing the films too, right?
100%.
So let's talk about JA Projects, the company, like, and I guess the vessel for your ideas. Is that both the art practice of making the images, the sound and performances, and then making it's like, to me, what you're running is like a record label, but of buildings.
Yeah, I love that as an analogy, because I mean, we do lean into sound a lot, you know. Like, I do feel like, especially from a Black perspective, sound and music is very much the thing that I have been inspired by, you know. Like, I grew up listening to you on the radio, do you know what I mean? And we grew up listening to the people on the radio, do you know what I mean? And I knew what it was to go to pirate radio and to have someone at home record it on the tape deck and then hear your sound transmitted, broadcast back into your house, and being like, okay, well, we just made space like that. Like, I know what that is, to commandeer rooms in council flats and to own them. I know what it is to be on roofs and to have kind of to broadcast your own truth and to be in control of that as a space. So depending on the day you ask me, I would tell you that my practice is either rooted in this kind of grime philosophy or in a playwork philosophy or the philosophy of play. And in some ways, I don't think there's much of a distinction. When we got a little bit older, we went Adventure Playground and you'd be down Weavers, or you get a little bit older and then you like sack off the playground for the stairwell. Do you know what I mean? The pirate radio stage, it's the same thing in terms of progression. It's about liberation, it's about freedom, it's about back and forth and reciprocity between your peers. So get into a space where I now have a practice which is dedicated to the amplification of quieter voices, or amplification of voices that I feel should be heard. It's kind of a direct reference to music. And so the record label analogy is kind of is amazing for me.
Usually those things would be, I guess, two separate people doing it, two different universes, or one is taking influence from another, but to actually have it embodied in one person or an organization that encapsulates that is very different. Like, you might have someone that will say, oh, like, I grew up listening to Rough Squad, for example, but then I'm doing this thing over here. Whereas you're like, I grew up listening to Rough Squad, and then this is kind of like, I'm doing V&A East, and it's in the place where, do you know what I mean? It's not an abstraction in a way. It's like, is of the thing that created it. You know what I'm saying?
For sure. I think it's a really tricky conundrum, if I'm honest, to speak openly about a business perspective, because there are things I can do that the business can't do.
Okay.
And there are things the business can do that I can't do. So I tend to distinguish it in two ways. A lot of this work, whether it was pirate radio or whatever, even our experience, would be rooted in trying to find and work out our place in the world. Now, I grew up in Bethnal Green. This was a white, working class, Bangladeshi, immigrant, predominant community. I'm a part Turkish Cypriot, part Trinidadian, black presenting kid. Like, what world am I trying to work out? Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to work out my place in the world. And so when I describe my art practice in an open way, is really attached to myself, because I think that's honest. You know, like, I'm really trying to work out my relationship to the world. I work so hard and you know, I do this for a living because I find that interesting. What that's done is extended that ambition and that mission for me to work out my presence and to be vocal about it and to be present within this world that we live in, has also extended to a wider mission, which is about understanding that other people also don't see themselves recognized in the world or want to explore their relationship to it. And so that's where it kind of shifts when it becomes slightly externalized and it's about other communities and it's not necessarily about myself. That's when it shifts into the kind of practice mode where we can be working with South Asian traders in Newham but it's not, do you know what I mean? It's not my experience. Like, I know what it is to walk through Queen's Market because I used to walk through that market when going to Upton Park.
Yep.
I'm not a West Ham fan, but do you know what I mean? I'd go with my coach and he'd be walking there. Do you know, I know what that is as a place and as a feeling, but it's not the thing I'm exploring or I'm projecting myself into. What I'm trying to cast is the studio as a vessel to make sure other people's stories and narratives are supported. But when it comes to me, then this is just pure art practice. So it's kind of different because the methodologies of practice that I'm exploring for myself personally are also the methodologies that we see in the studio. So the output is artistic, but I suppose the distinction is it's in the service of others,
yes,
rather than in the service of myself. And so maybe the methodologies are both somewhere between art and architecture or performance and architecture or wherever it is. But the mission is slightly different.
Yeah. And I guess when you're doing work through the company, you're responding to like commissions. So you're responding to like a brief, like, okay, we want to do this thing, get it done in this particular way.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of, all right, this is our mission and these are how the two things align, right?
Yeah, you can do that in the personal space as well, though. Of course, like that's the liberty that art gives you, right? Do you know what I mean? That you can say Venice, for example. Like, I had worn a number of hats when we was curating and designing the British Pavilion. It's an interesting model, right? As a co-curator, there's a team of 4 of us. I was also an exhibiting artist.
Okay.
So there were 5 exhibiting artists, of which I was one of them. Not all the co-curators were exhibiting artists. Like, I was the only one that was an exhibiting art in that respect. And then we all collectively made the film at the beginning. So we were kind of in some ways, but kind of a different thing because I had a budget to make a sculptural work and was treated in the same way as everybody else because and in that context, there's a brief. And the brief is, explore your relationship to the world, right? Do you know what I mean? We understand what the framework of the conversation is, but there's still the liberty for you to explore yourself and your relation. There's not so many external pressures. Of course, the rest of my curatorial team would be given advice, and they did, and do you know what I mean? It served them in a little bit, but there was far more flexibility, and in the same way that all the other artists had to respond. However, the studio, and I distinguish this, designed the pavilion.
Okay.
So I was the co-curator, I was the exhibiting artist, do you know what I mean? Co-maker of the film, but the studio designed, and it's a very different thing because the studio is now subservient to everybody else. They're helping to define the framework, but there's something when you're in the discourse, and we do a lot of this stuff where we're designing exhibitions or in dialogue with other artworks, where we're trying to fill a gap in the narrative rather than to dictate what the narrative should be.
Okay. Give me an example of this. What would be filling the gap in the narrative?
So filling the gap in Venice, for example, is a very simple thing. We suggested how and where artists would display works. We left the pavilion relatively empty, and we suggested that there was a good narrative here, which was about occupation of this pavilion, which had historically been occupied very rarely by Black people, by Black and brown people. And There's an amazing work by Yinka Shonibari called Diary of a Victorian Dandy, where he's standing in the middle of the room in Victorian dress, commanding the room, you know, in this old kind of palatial suite. He is a black disabled man, but in his render, he's commanding the space. It's amazing. He commands that because he doesn't stand at the side or at the door. He stands at the middle and the world orbits around him. So we made a suggestion that all of the work as a framework would be located in the middle of these rooms, so that every time you walked into the room, you would understand that, okay, we're going to support this narrative to be center, to be front and center, and everybody has to negotiate it, right? And then we said, actually, okay, cool. There's this amazing thing like where they're really diverse as objects, but we want to bring them together somehow. And we're in this place where we're talking about the location of the pavilion and its history as a neo-colonial endeavor, an extension of the British state and the British Empire, and the recognition that we're here because of the British Empire as well. So, do you know what I mean? There's a reciprocal dialogue. It's not just a critique in that space. But a lot of what the artists were bringing to the table was a narrative about other geographies and other lands. So we said what we're proposing as kind of an exhibition context where we're filling the gap is we're just going to make you a tray. And you can put any work on this tray, but it would be great for you to work with us to determine what should fill the tray. So there was a work by Madhav Kadal, which was about the transition between life and death and South Asian spirituality. And in that context, the black sand was a really kind of present material. And so we filled the tray with black sand. In Sandra Paulson's work, which was in the rear room, that was about cleansing rituals of Angola. And so we also filled the tray with like melted soap panels. We had another work, and it was very much about by Matt Collins, and it was about itinerant Caribbean cultures, specifically from that exist in the Midlands, where there was a Caribbean community that would take over the local pub on a Friday, Saturday, or a Sunday. I don't know what day it was, but they would play dominoes, and if you walked in, and so we had this shot of, we saw we shot some film in this kind of moment, and it's dominoes, bro. Like, do you know what I mean? But it's taking place in a pub, like in the maddest thing. So in a quintessential English setting, but with all of the kind of amazing blackness that exists in that moment. And so the context, how we filled the gap in terms of the story there, is that we worked with Mac to create some upholstered base, which was referential to the seat backs that you get in a pub setting. So we're trying to support the work to tell a different story. And that's very different to us saying, this is the story and someone else needs to respond to it. So it's a supportive kind of moment.
And yeah, and it's a lot more like, I guess, into it than just hanging a picture on the wall and someone just like looking at things. They have to like question it themselves, right? I guess people going up to the work and being like,
yeah,
tell me more, or ask more questions about it, right?
I think it's about, not to get so architectural, but I think it's about two things. It's about arrangement, like how things are set up, and it's about material in terms of textures or tectonics. It's about form and material in general, and I think that's a good project that can demonstrate it. It's an old project. I mean, like if you think about how we constructed this space in the Royal Academy in terms of this evening, there's a formal composition which is about how it's structured, who does the intro, how people sit. And then there's a textual overlay, which is like what you see in the background, how the lighting works, what sounds do you hear, you know, whose voices do you hear? There's something in it, like that the textures are not only physical textures, they also can be intangible textures that have as much like power and potency.
With that kind of format of, I guess, the kind of lecture performance, showing of work style presentation, do you have a kind of vision to take that to the next level? Because I feel like more people seeing that would be like, oh, okay, this is like an art form in itself that could be that's something that could be in the theatre, could be like developed even further.
I really do. I think we're due one as well. It was amazing because we had a photographer and we said we could film it, like so we could just have our photos, and then we looked at it. It exists on our website as a project.
Yeah,
and it's called JA Projects for a reason. Like that, projects has an openness. It's not called JA Architects, or it's not called like whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's called JA Projects and plural with an S on the end. I think I'm really inspired by, at the moment, by the intensity of programming that exists in New York. I don't know what it is and I can't put my finger on it. If I was to hazard a guess, it's because the more you come to understand America, the more you understand that New York is unique in that sense that it's very much has a different political inclination to the rest of America, and often feels, now can feel under threat.
Okay.
In so many ways.
Go back into that word intensity, and just extrapolate what you mean by the intensity of the program and your relationship with New York right now, because you're a Londoner but working on both sides.
We're based in London, but we have an office in New York because we're doing some work with a major cultural institution there, which is kind of amazing, right? That we've developed this set of skills that can be exported to the world. This is incredible. If we talk about broadcast, right? Like I wake up feeling lucky every day that I can do this and I can have this exposure. And, when I used to do play work and I used to look after children at the Cherry Tree School, which was in Bow, take them to play after work. One of my first things I used to do is take them to Greenwich. And then I go to Greenwich and we go to the top of the hill, the observatory, and we look out, we look back over, because opposite East London, especially those that lived in like Canary Wharf, like in the shadow of Canary Wharf, and then they could see their house. And then they know the world is big. The world is big. Like it's not Mud Shoot Farm. Like it's a big world to be in. And so to have access to that, like I feel like that all the time. And I'm so deeply grateful for everyone that's kind of given us some form of opportunity or seen some value in the stuff that we offer, and I commit to it wholeheartedly. And it's something that's taken me to New York, and in twofolds. One, because we're doing, we have a commission, and we need a space to kind of like meet and and do whatever we need to do. But mainly because I've been invited to teach for the last 2 terms at Columbia University in the two Springs terms, which is also incredible. Like education has always been, play work has always been part of my world. Broadening horizons, giving people the skills to engage with their community, to understand the opportunities that exist in the world. So to do that at a postgraduate level is something that I did when I was teaching at Central St. Martin's, and it's something that I've now, have been doing in New York, which is amazing. But to go back to your question about intensity, is that, which I was going to get to, is that whenever I go to some form of programming, like some form of events, it's like our events times 5. They're far more pointed, they're far more political.
Mm-hmm.
People are far more like, no, I'm just going to say this thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to tread the lines about where we stand on this. They give a lot of, at the moment where people, the institutions that do it best, a lot of credence and time to the arc of an event, that it's not just you turn up and it's the same old tired format. They're inventive, like I was talking about this thing that Naja done and the other day, which was kind of amazing. And there's really great programming that takes place at the Centre for Arts and Research and Alliances, a kind of amazing name, like Centre for Arts Research and Alliances, incredible, right? Do you know what I mean? The Swiss Institute's got amazing programming as well. And I'm interested in, not everywhere has that intensity of programming, but I'm inspired by that programming. And I'm interested in doing some of that work that we did at the Royal Academy in New York to tap into that energy. And I think that energy exists because I think for whatever reasons, and they're probably obvious, but like over the past 3-4 years, whatever it is, the walls have been caving in because New York is very much a city built on migration. It very much sits in the kind of in a more liberal spectrum. And, in America, there's just black and white, man. Like, do you know what I mean? It's so intense. But it's also existed in a context where you have Mamdani as mayor. And so now I've seen the shift in 2 years where people felt like they had their backs against the walls. And now they've kind of recovered their energy. And now they're doing stuff that's really avant-garde and really unapologetic in terms of the future that they want to be in. And so those programmatic shifts are also world-building shifts. Like, they're building communities, they're building alliances. Like, I want to do some of that in that space. I suppose it's more about the events having some form of intention or capacity to change the future in even a small way than it is just a projection of the verbalization of an idea.
Yes. So like in your event, you had Yomi Sode, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doing poetry at the beginning and end.
He opened with just breathing, tapping
Yes.
his chest, breathing, stepping into the light. It was incredible.
And you had other poets and artists.
We
Right?
had Rahma Rahman, who's an amazing artist, but also fashion designer out of Bethnal Green. We had Tandy Lowson and Rosa Johan Udo doing this kind of amazing performative lecture.
Yeah, it felt kind of like improv. It was
Around Martians.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, it was incredible.
But yeah, this kind of like, again, that balance in between, I guess, the art and the practical, the art and, you know what I mean? Like this physical aspect. It feels new, that kind of presentation. And there was a point to it. It wasn't like, it was entertaining without it being entertainment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, although I don't think entertainment is a bad thing.
No, sure not.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think there's power in stories, and I think there's power in entertaining stories. So even if you said it was entertainment, I would probably put on like entertainment with purpose or entertainment. But I wouldn't reject
I'm not trying to lighten the load and say, okay, well, entertainment is like a lesser form of art or anything like that. That's not what I'm framing it as. I'm more like, okay, there's like a really unusual way of, I guess, presenting those ideas. And I guess if you're saying that is we can go, me, you, a whole bunch of others that are kind of like participating in like idea production, knowledge production, can go, we've got like 5x to go still. Yeah. Then I'm like, all right, cool. Or where do we take it next then?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And even that, we've both done things within walls. Okay, what happens if you do it outside like DJ AG? What happens if you do it like in a place where we can, instead of doing it in front of 500 people, we do it in front of 5,000? Like then what? How does that change the messaging? Do you know what I'm saying?
I mean, I would love to do it in front of 5,000, man. I think there's an attraction to performance as well, which is, for me, is a bit undeniable.
Of course.
I just want to be on the mic. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a scary place to be. Mm-hmm. It's enthralling. Like, it can really be. It's obviously born out of a place of kind of like ego as well, but it's also born out of a place of purpose. When I stopped teaching at Central St. Martin's, I was like, look, nobody does in this profession. I'm sick and tired of teaching how it should be done. And nobody in this profession looks or sounds like me. So why are we hiding? I saw then this amazing thing at the Apollo the other day. I forget her name. She's the director of the National Black Theatre up in Harlem. And she was speaking from the perspective of being a Black woman. She was like, we're building on the generations that have been before us. The generations that have been before us had to build in silence. But we don't need to be silent anymore because we have the kind of tools of broadcast at our fingertip. So we're just going to be here and we're going to be proud and we're going to be loud and we're going to be vocal about it, Mm-hmm. And whilst she had a she had a 5x energy on me.
Yeah.
Her energy was elite.
Yeah.
I still think there's scope for that, and I think there's scope to not be shy about it. And so that's really exciting as well from a personal perspective.
Does it feel like you've got like a pointed message that 5,000 people can take away and be like, right, now I'm going to go and get that done. I'm going to, all right, Jayden's projects, right, boom, I need to go and make a building. All right, this sculpture is going to mangle this next thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, what do you want people to do in response to your work?
I think with all my work, I'm just trying to tell people that they can change the world.
Okay.
Like, we're just world builders. I want people to feel empowered that they can change the world. Like, I believe in that. Like, I love people when they put things out in the world because they start to shape it. Like, I love you for putting this book out in the world because it occupies space. There was negative space there before, and now I got this amazing book with this smiley square face grinning at me. Like, it's amazing. Then it's full of tools, right? Do you know what I mean? It's empowering. Like, I just think like I wouldn't balk at the opportunity to convey that message. I think it's a message that needs to be heard because I recognize I knew when I heard people on the radio that they could change the world.
100%.
Like, I knew that. They were showing me, like, I could feel it, you know, that my truth had value somehow, and it was worthy of broadcast, and it was worthy of being present. And so I would love to pay that forward, you know, like, I don't know, you know, like the format of it or whatever it would be, but I think that would be incredible. I also think the energy transfer would be immense, you know, from a spiritual perspective. I saw this amazing thing, like I went to see, it was like J Electronica at like the Camden.
Oh, Jazz Cafe?
Yeah.
A few months ago.
No, it was more like, it was when he came out with the album with Jay-Z.
Okay.
2020. It was mad. It was mad because we were upstairs. We just had dinner. It was me and like me and a few boys, and we didn't know that. But he came out and he announced himself. And the way he announced himself, he came out of a side door in the balcony, nudged one of us, and was like, "Do you mind?" And we was like, "Yeah, sure." Like, he got out of our seat and he stood on the seat and just screamed into the room, right?
Yeah.
And then he went downstairs. And so we was in this ether. There was a swirlingness of energy, like a build-up of energy to the point in which he was in the crowd. And you could tell it was more trance-like. Do you know what I mean? Like, there was this kind of reciprocal dialogue between him and the crowd. And I think maybe that is something I would explore. Do you know what I mean? How you can pass energy between the stage. Like, I think probably you've done that quite a lot, right? Because you've been in these cycles of DJing. I've never really been in that space. I think it's always been a bit of a projection. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes I play films and the lights are off and I can't see no one. So do you know what I mean? I
guess the closest thing to that kind of feeling, maybe it's probably actually just watching and seeing maybe tunes like with the first plays they get, and they're like, people are like, yeah, cool. And then you see a tune take life over time. And over the years, you see it, okay, say like Man Don't Care or something. You just like, the first few times you play it, it's like, cool, pop in. And then there's a point where everyone knows it, loves it, whatever. And then there's like another point, you know, a few years later where like people are kind of acknowledging it's like a classic or something, you know what I mean? And then there's like that second life maybe of it being, right, it's not even just a classic. We've been listening to it for 10 years or something.
And it still bangs.
It's like one of those things. And again, I as I've been, I guess, on this journey of life, you've seen how few of those kind of fragments survive. There's loads of sparks in the, you know, when you're going through scenes and music and culture, and you know what I mean? There are bits, you're like, okay, this person puts out that tune, that's hot. And then 10 years later, it's like 3 or 4 ideas survive, or Rhythm and Gash or whatever, or just like a couple of artists, you know what I'm saying?
Do you think only a few fragments survive? I think we've been so lucky for so many fragments to survive.
Yeah, well, I'll go into V&A, like, so I went to the V&A, The Music is Black exhibition, and we're trying to encapsulate like decades and decades of us making all this stuff here in the country. And you're like, wow, it'd be like, it's obviously impossible to like capture all of that in a really small building. And you're like, okay, wow. Like every section gets a very small, every genre basically gets like a very small amount of airtime for obvious reasons.
I'm going to say, do you know what? Even though I was involved in that in the building.
Yeah.
I was so in my own project. I haven't done the whole exhibition with
Okay.
the head, but
Yeah.
I walked through it.
Yeah.
But I know what you're saying. But did you think it was good?
Basically, I think these things existing is good. And now the next leap for all of us is like getting into specificity, and not just in terms of genres. It's like in terms of like the ideas and the fragments. Okay, what was the messaging of this particular idea? Why did these people organize in this way? Who are the families of these sounds? Like really getting into the weeds of some of this stuff. You know what I mean? I think the good thing that's happened in the last, especially like 5-6 years in particular, there's been like major exhibitions, installations, books, documentaries of us being here. It's documented. You know what I mean? Black British music, Black British culture. Okay, cool, we're here. Now it's like, now let's get into what we want to say with all of this information. What does it mean? You know what I'm saying? What does it mean going forward? Is there I think about this a lot, where if you were just introducing people to a canon of Black British culture, like where would you start? Would it be like 10 out of 20 albums, 20 books, 20 films, 20 buildings, and 20 statues?
You'd be hard pushed to get 20 buildings, bro, I tell you that.
Well, you're gonna be one of those people.
You'd get different type of buildings.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You get like organization spaces and community spaces. You wouldn't get you get like buildings that have been taken over, but you wouldn't get.
Are there many Black built buildings in London of
Not
like
that many, no.
cultural significance?
No.
And that's changing.
Hope so. There's a good set of peers. I wanted to ask a question though. Do you know about this thing? And I don't really know how this should work, whether it's you asking me, but
Go
whatever.
for it.
How do you feel about the culture living in the museum, and does that represent a sort of death?
The culture that's happened can live in the museum.
Yeah.
But I guess what's coming out of it is living still out in the world today. So there is this kind of like acknowledgement of a period of time that's come before. So like when you do these, like say like a Black British music exhibition or an exhibition of a particular artist or scene, that is an acknowledgement of all the things that happened. But I don't think it's like really intersecting with what is happening day to day or the material conditions for the people that participate in those things. So, and I don't think it's the right space for that. You know what I mean? Why do you ask?
I think there's a bittersweet moment that I feel about it. I'm so romantic about, like, do you know what I mean? People are often romantic about their upbringing. Like, and I try not to get pinned down by it. Do you know what I mean? I'm not here to kind of like mimic. I'm not here to mimic a grime aesthetic. Like, do you know what I mean? I'm here to kind of recognize and acknowledge how I felt and what I've seen happen, the miracles I've seen happen in my lifetime. I just felt that there was something that happens in that moment where you couldn't put this thing in a box. You just couldn't fucking contain this thing, man. Like, it was just, literally couldn't contain it. It was in the ether in so many ways. And recognizing that there is a process of containment that exists when it's presented by an institution. Where it's gone through that moment. And that's about, so there's something about time in there that, do you know what I mean, it's very distant, or a longing for kind of an effervescence in music today and subcultures today. I'm
glad that I guess the first decade of the music basically had not that much industry or institutional interference, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of just left alone. I can't sell, okay, these men are just doing whatever they're doing and ignoring it. Sometimes they'll take this hand, put them on pop records, whatever it's going to be. And, you know, it was used in different ways, but it wasn't seen as a commercial entity until way later, until like 2014, 15. And I think that is why people reflect on it as this special thing, because they're like, oh, like it went, no music scene or culture now will be incubated for that long without, you know, a brand or a museum or anything like that coming in. And what I guess once you make something and I put it on Instagram, then it's for the world. And I think a lot of the scenes, the early like noughties and 2010 scenes from across the world, so that could be like grime, jungle, footwork in Chicago.
That Tim and Barry documentary is amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's amazing.
Scenes like that were, you know, super local in the place that it was, and then it's like okay, as soon as you put it on the internet, now it changes what it is when it becomes like, I don't know.
That's why
Yeah.
I want to, that's the programming.
Yes.
The energy that you're conveying there is the programming, is the energy I want to convey in the programming. Like, maybe I take it back. I would like to know what 5,000 people in that energy is. Yeah, do you know what I mean? But it doesn't need to be 5,000 people. It can be like 20.
Yes.
Like the Electronica thing was 150 or something. You know, like this thing in the Apollo Theatre the other day was amazing, and it was probably 200. You know, our thing at whatever the RA was like 300 or something. It can be 30, it can be 40. Just it's about the intensity of experience, and I think I'm interested in how you have immediate realms of broadcast and how those echoes kind of ripple through society to bring people around a mission or a voice or like a moment. You know, I think we need some kind of like real life, person to person transmission would be a good space to get back to.
Yeah. I need to think about it a lot. Like, I guess a lot of the people that talk to me about work or artists that are coming through, I guess their entry and the trajectory in it is to be, I guess, accepted by industry. So if you're a producer, a writer, a singer, rapper, DJ, you're like finding a way to get signed or try to get to an agency or to get to some sort of platform where you can be broadcast to millions of people, right? Or tour the world or whatever it's going to be. Whereas actually, some of the times I'm like, okay, how do you, again, wheel this back and go smaller? Like, what does it mean when, like the other day I did an event with Charlie Dark in Walthamstow.
Amazing. Hold tight, Charlie.
Yeah, like 40 people.
I went to come, this is when you DJ'd for the day or something.
Yeah,
right?
so we did like 2 listening sessions with his sound system in a room just a bit bigger than this, kind of like, and he broke down the anatomy of the sound system, how it works, showing people, okay, cool, this, you know, press this.
So,
and it makes people, again, hopefully people come away from that and they're like, all right, cool, I'm going to make a tune, or I'm going to not necessarily think about the streaming service or whatever, something that's very distant and not as tangible, and think about, okay, how can I bring something to my local pub or the upstairs of that thing that no one's using, or the library, you know what I mean? And all of these spaces that are kind of waiting to be occupied by people. People want them to be used. Like I walk past these pubs near me, and the extra room is always free for people to do stuff. And you think, wow, like there must be thousands of people living nearby with ideas, but they probably think that because they're consuming stuff on Instagram, that's not big enough to do, 20, 30 people thing.
I often think that it's really about this recognition of trying to be in the industry or whatever it is, is about being in the kind of like more commercial center of things. And that it's really important to be, and it is important, like, you know, for me, like I have a practice which is at that commercial, like I know what it is to design parts of a museum for the Victoria and Albert Museum, you know, like that's just, you don't get more center than that in a historic way. But it's also really important to be in other centers. Like you can describe them as to being on the edge, but the edge always has a center. Like we know that the edge might be Ridley Road, but we know the Ridley Road is a center for other people.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like the center might be your grandma's front room, but we know that that's a center for other people. So to be able to oscillate between both is really an important space for me. And it's something I think about in the practice so often, which is about, and why I have this architecture, art practice, myself, discourse, because it's about freedom. It's about liberty. Do you know what I mean? It's about definition on your own terms, or it's about definition or contribution to what you know on what's already valued. And I think that's really important. Like, I just think it's super important that people should not forget the fact that, yeah, it's fine to be in the game as you like and to be in a space, because there is something that the center has where the more commercial center or historic center, whatever we call that, where it allows you scale.
Like
and
money
reach.
and visibility,
Yeah.
To do the cool stuff you like.
But that shouldn't be equated to impact or value, because there's impact and value that grows from other spaces. And I think it's good for us to be in that. Like, my whole nervousness about stuff entering in the museum is basically born out of a hope that it still is fermenting somewhere else. And maybe it's born out of my naivety of where that fermentation is existing, because it's usually people who are younger than me in a different space. But I also think it's more difficult for that incubation to exist in real life, because everything is broadcast, right?
Yep.
And even the stuff on the edges ends up in the world.
Yeah. Well, I think, even just the example that you're given, like, what if you said no? Like, what would it look like then?
To know to what?
To doing something like the V&A East, for example, and like what would have been in the space in replacement of that, or who would have done it, or who would have got the opportunity, and what shape that would have taken. So you actually saying yes and shaping it to something that is part of your vision is like a good filter in itself. Do you know what I'm saying?
It's better for us being involved.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm 100% sure of it.
Yeah.
It's not absolutely perfect, but it's better for us being involved. And, I would rather trust. Look, there are a few people who could have got that job, and I would trust some of them, and that's okay. Like,
but they have different motives.
I trust some of them. They would do a good job. Do you know what I mean? And, but I definitely trust myself in that context. Like, I knew that project was for us. Like, I just knew a team that included me and Larry Achimpong, amazing artist.
Yeah, man.
My brethren from Bethnal Green, just incredible, pioneer, multifaceted, just big brother, do you know what I mean? Like, just me and him, and then an amazing graphic design practice, female-led, also based in Bethnal Green. For us to come together as a team and go into our interview and show scenes of the film Larry made when he went down and he's eating and eat palichis. I know this project's for us.
Yes.
Like, there ain't no other way about that. Like, I feel confident about that as a space in whichever way it would have come out. You know why? Because the project is not the output. The project is the process. And I worked on this project for 4 years.
Wow.
And I worked with the youth collective, and I know what it's like to walk into a room and hear your accent projected back at you. I know what it is to hear it as a voice of authority. Your accent and your history. Like, I know what that is. And I know what it is to also speak back to that moment as well, and to contribute and to feel valued. And so that discourse and that dialogue is something that very few people could bring to the project. And so the growth is, and the impact is beyond the output of like the design.
Exactly.
The impact is in the 50 young people that went through this process and glimpsed the vision of what could be.
Yeah, there's going to be stories about that group of people and a few other young people's groups in the future that will be like, okay, the first project that they were part of was like that East Bank.
And I hate that they're going to eclipse me. I hate it. I'm like, okay, they're coming.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm looking behind me like, oh yeah, they're going to be coming.
But it's beautiful to know that is, like, the things that you do today are like an option for people. You know what I mean? They look at it and be like, right, cool, yeah, I can do that.
If you can see it, you can be it.
Yeah.
It's really simple. It's really, really simple. If you can see it, you can be it.
Do you think your work is kind of informing, I guess, the kind of commissions that you're actually getting in the first place? So like the work you're producing is probably changing people's decisions on their approaches, not just to you, but to other people. So you're actually changing the city, even if you're not building it. They've seen things that you worked on, maybe the art that you produced, your writing that you put out.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, we were thinking of it like this, but we listened to what these are doing over here, or we've seen the work that we're doing over here, and now we're going to actually shift the thing.
I hope so. I hope like our projects embody a form of advocacy.
Yes.
You know, I'm an advocate for the mayor, and I think I take that role seriously. Like, advocate for what? You know, like.
Can you explain what you mean by an advocate for the mayor?
So the Mayor of London has a series of kind of mayoral design advocates. They're called MDAs for short. And essentially we promote good, what the mayor calls his good growth agenda. This is the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, which is about how the development of the city should be supportive and more equitable for Londoners. So to be really at the forefront of that knowledge production as to kind of like, what is it that we're advocating for, and what are the mechanisms which we can promote in terms of, we do design reviews, we put together different types of guidance. We did one on design for women and girls and gender diverse people in terms of guidance. You know, we do design reviews. I'm on the design review panel for Oxford Street. So not only am I in this project, which is about the pedestrianisation of Regent Street, which is north-south, like Regent's Park to St. James's Park, where Piccadilly Circus exists in the middle. But I sit on this design review panel, which is about Oxford Street, which is east-west. This is little old me from Bethnal Green in the middle of this kind of like cross-axes of central London, and what that should be. And I take that seriously, you know, like sure. I think it's important to offer something to the world. I think that the flip side of what you're and is the project a vehicle to be inspired? Like, are we going to be inspired by it, and can it be inspiring to others? Is a good measure.
You touched on it before, but like, what does the term world building mean to you? I feel like you're literally world building. You know, jumping between New York and London.
Yeah, I don't think the term is, although I like your segue, I don't think the term is like global. Like it doesn't necessitate being global.
Sure.
In that sense. I think it's more about understanding how you can influence the environment around you, and that the influence you have on it and the decisions you make, where you place an object, how it sounds, what incense you light, who you invite into the space, how you gather, is of a transformative nature, and all has the capacity not only to impact yourself, but those around you. That is a really magical and empowering act. And I want to continue to be in that space and advocate for people to be conscious of how they do it, even in their very, very small ways.
Sweet.
Like, I love that you've made this little world in here.
Yes.
And I'm like, yeah, I want the lights on. Do you know, it's incredible to come and like commandeer and occupy and be present.
Thank you. Last one. How can people contribute to making the ends beautiful?
Oh. The thing that's amazing about that question is this is the first time we've talked about beauty. It's amazing because we shirk it all the time, and I actually am really committed to it. And I think it comes in so many shapes and forms. I think it is a place I think it's a place that has to be kind of produced from a position of love. And I don't mean that in a kind of a cheesy way. Do you know what I mean? I think people need to understand that they're cared for and they're seen and they're acknowledged. And I think that should be the starting position of any kind of intervention that you have that impacts not only impacts others, but impacts yourself. You know, like, is it caring? Like, is it productive? Is it supportive? Does it make you feel safe? Does it make you feel seen? Does it make you feel heard? And then I think it's about energy and effort and understanding that you have this impact on yourself and others, and how you can deal with that with intention. And I think the intentionality is really about an investment of time, an investment of energy. And I think we all have that. Like, I think that's free. And I think, you know, the more we're conscious about it, I feel confident that the beauty will come in the dialogue and how that's kind of reciprocally given back to you as well. Like, I really believe in kind of like energy into a certain degree. So there's no, maybe just to be clear about it, I don't think I don't think there's an aesthetic which comes with beauty. I think there's more of a feeling.
Yeah. That's a good way of ending it, man. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man.
We should learn. Thank you so much.